rock, and I will take it home. And if it's okay, I'll bring it back. But if it's not, just know I took one for the team. I'm just saying. But anyway, 194, since Jesus came into my heart. I'm so glad, seriously, Grandpa Yager didn't quit on Grandma Yager. At least before child number 5. After that, whatever. But child number 5 was a big deal. And here he is, almost 60. When you count the ones in heaven, 60. Grandchildren, great-grands, crazy. So never let up. You don't know the blessings. You don't know the blessings. So let's sing verse 4 and 5 together. Then the chorus. There's a light. There's a light in the valley of death now for me. Since Jesus came into my heart. And the gates of the city beyond I can see. Since Jesus came into my heart. That's fine. I shall build it. Charles, he should be doctor at this point. He's been teaching 187 years. He taught Noah's children when they got off the ark. And he's been teaching ever since. And he's retired about 18 times, and then he goes back to work teaching. He's got a heart of a teacher. So he'll be teaching us the Word of God this afternoon. And if he doesn't finish, he's planning on Thursday as well. And so, Brother Yager, Dad, come on and preach the word. You don't have a clock, so it's on you.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, we'll leave. Lock up.
All right, looks like I gotta put you to sleep now. All right. Yeah. Having a lot of kids, it's been a lot of fun. Especially when we started out, we had 4 under 4. So, and then we ended up with eight total. No, they were spread out over 16 years, I guess. But anyway, I don't do this very often, but today I was happy with the sermon, and I got it all prepared, and then AJ almost took it away from me.
There's water out there.
So I'm going to do like that old guy on the news, TV guy, you know, can tell the rest of the story. And you might recognize that phrase, but you may not know who said it. But anyway, I want you to go to the book of Exodus.
Yeah.
And just go to the first page. Now, I know most of you have already heard these sermons because your dad just went through them. Anyway, we're going to go to Exodus chapter 1, and we might get to, hopefully, about chapter 20. So it's kind of like a fit, because the sermon I was going to do was going to be a little later in the book. But anyway, let's go to Exodus chapter 1. And there's some interesting things I find in this chapter. So I just want to point something out. I'm kind of a history buff, so you know, I have to throw that stuff out to you. You know, history, we make history, but actually we don't live history. So here we have the book of Exodus, and it says, and I'm not going to read all these names because I can't pronounce half of them anyway. Now the names of the children of Israel. And Israel, in this case, is not the nation of Israel. It's the man Israel. Okay? These are Israel, the man. And how did he get that name? That God gave it to him. He had been called Jacob. But now God's calling him Israel. So yeah, he comes down to Egypt. And why does he come down? It says every man in his household came with Jacob. They came down there because there was a kid down there. A kid that was thought to be dead. Joseph had been in Egypt a long time. Nobody knew he was alive down there. But he was. He was serving Pharaoh as, you might say, the second in command. We call him a vice Pharaoh, I guess.
That's in Hebrew.
Joseph had predicted through God that there was going to be a famine. And so Pharaoh trusted him, put him in charge. So when you think about it, he wasn't, actually, Joseph had a record. He'd been in jail for several years, you know, and Pharaoh, pardons him, puts him in charge of the kingdom, and gives him the second car to drive, you know, we might say. You know, his chariot was right behind the Pharaoh's, because Pharaoh trusted Joseph. But eventually, his brothers come down because they needed some food. And Joseph was the one that was passing it out, and he saw his brothers, but didn't recognize him. They didn't recognize him, Joseph that is, but he recognized. So anyhow, Joseph is down there, his brothers are down there, his dad's down there, and there's about 74 of them that migrated in from up north, him and his dad. But now, there comes something in verse 8, a new king. A new king comes on the scene. And by a new king, it doesn't just mean the guy died and granddaughter, grandson, whatever it is, came on the scene. But a new king came over that was completely ignorant of what Joseph had done for Egypt. Joseph had made Egypt a powerful nation. But later on, after about 300 years or so, a new king came on the scene. A new family of kings, really is what it is. And they knew not Joseph, in verse 8. And he came up with a great idea. It seems like new kings, when they come in, always want to have great ideas. But in this case, he had an idea, but it wasn't so good for the people of God. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are. There's more of them. They're living out here. There's millions of these Israelites. They probably didn't call them Israelites, but we'll do that for the sake of identification. And they're mightier than we are. So we need to do something. Well, one thing to do is kill off all the kids. That'll put your population down pretty fast. But they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to kill the boys. So whenever a boy was born, he was supposed to be executed, aborted, we would call it today. We're a little more fancier than those old people are. And so he says if there's going to be a war, they'll turn against us. So they begin to do this. Now, when were they going to do this? They weren't going to kill the men, but they would make sure the babies that were born, if it was a boy, it would die. And he had some midwives that were working. Now these midwives were Israeli midwives. And so whenever a baby was born, she'd check it out, whether it was a boy or girl. But she didn't kill the boys. Or they didn't kill the boys, because there were several of these apparently. And they did not do as the king of Egypt, this is verse 17, had commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And pretty soon the Pharaoh got kind of suspicious, There's nobody getting killed like they're supposed to be. Nobody's being aborted. And so he went to the midwives and asked them, why aren't these boys dying? And guess what? Those midwives said this. Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered before we get there. And guess what? They're not letting us kill them. You might say that because kind of racist for them. Egyptians women are weaker than the Israeli women. So anyway, they deliver them, and therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. So instead of the nation getting smaller, it was getting bigger and stronger. So Pharaoh had to come up with another plan. So he does that. Verse 22. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. So he's still going with this idea of killing off these men, baby boys, I should say, or baby men, and they're supposed to throw them into the river. Of course, the River Nile was a god in the Egyptians' religion, and so if you threw a baby in there, of course, there were crocodiles in the river too, so you know who got fed for all. Anyway, but now, there's a man and a wife of the tribe of Levi, and they come up with a great idea. Put our baby in a boat and send him on out, you know, and let's see what happens. I think they knew what God was going to plan. God was working this thing out. So, this family says that the woman conceived, she bare a son, and when she saw him, he was a goodly child. She hid him for 3 months, and then, when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes, that's a little boat made out of bulrushes, and dabbed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and then put him out in the river among the flags. That's those tall pieces of growth that are along the riverbank. And so they would hide him for a while, but pretty soon, that's not gonna last very long. And his sister now, oh, guess what? He's got a sister, and she is probably about 10 or so years old. And so she is watching baby brother out there in that little boat, and watching for the crocodiles eating. No, about that. She was trying to protect him as best she could. And she saw that her baby brother was spotted out there in those bulrushes. And verse 5 says, the daughter of Pharaoh came to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maiden out to fetch it. She wanted to see what was in that little boat. Well, she got out there, and notice what happened. She opened it up, verse 6, saw the child. And you know what babies do. They always, when they wake up, what do? They start crying. And so she saw it and heard it, and the baby wept, and she had compassion. Now, pardon me. She recognized him as being a Hebrew. You know, they could tell an Egyptian from a Hebrew just by looking at him. And she knew it's a Hebrew baby. But notice what she did. She didn't drown it.
Yeah.
She took it. Then in verse 7 it said, then his sister came to Pharaoh's daughter and asked a question. Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women? Did she mean nurse the child for thee? Because Pharaoh's daughter, she probably wasn't even married, and she couldn't nurse him. She needed somebody to help her, and sister just said, do you need a helper? You need somebody to watch this child? And the Pharaoh's daughter said, yeah, go. And the maid went and called her mom, the baby. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, unto the mother, and she didn't know it was the mother, but she might have suspicioned it was. Take this child away, nurse it for me, and I will give thee wages. And the woman took the child and nursed it. You know, a lot of women would like to have somebody pay them for nursing their own Sure, he could have made it.
Why didn't I think?
Trying to put it in the water.
The child grew and was brought back finally to Pharaoh's daughter, and how old he was, we don't know. But he probably was kind of young, but I imagine Mom kept nursing him just as long as she could. And he became Pharaoh's daughter's son. She adopted him. I mean, this kid, we'd say out in the street, and someone, picked him up, and now he's adopted, but his mom had been the one that raised him, and she called his name Moses. That's what Pharaoh's daughter called him. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. Well, Moses, he's a kid, he's adopted, but they treat him just like he's a real son, because to the Pharaoh's daughter, he was a real son to her. And so he grows up in the Pharaoh's house. He had all those privileges that Pharaoh kids had. And he's gotten older, and several years have gone by. We're probably talking about Moses probably in his 20s. He wasn't just a kid. He was a little bigger than that, but he was still just a child as far as his mom was concerned, his foster mom or his adopted mom. And he was out walking around and looking, and he noticed there was an Egyptian beating or smiting a Hebrew, and Moses knew that Hebrew was part of his group. He knew that he knew that he was an Egyptian, and the Egyptians knew that he was an Egyptian. But he still had the garb of Pharaoh. So he's Pharaoh, or in that Pharaoh family. Anyhow, so he looks and kills the Egyptian because he was beating on his family, you might say. But he thought he'd gotten by with it. I mean, after all, he is Pharaoh's family. But notice what happened. He buries the guy in the sand, and then he goes out the next day or so, and then he finds out there's a problem. Because the Egyptians know that Pharaoh's child has killed somebody. And it's not an Egyptian. I mean, it is not a Hebrew, which would have been okay. That'd been all right for Pharaoh's child to kill a Hebrew. But it was an Egyptian. And it's not a secret. Now, it might not have gotten back to Pharaoh yet, the king, but it was going to. Notice what happened. We think a lot of times we get by with something, but something always spots us. God always knows what we're doing. But when humans begin to know, they want something from him. Now, notice what happens. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews were striving. They were fighting. And he said to them, "What's wrong? Wherein you smite us, thy fellows?" And one of the guys that's fighting here says to Pharaoh's daughter's son, "Who made you prince?" Oh, he's already a prince, but not of the Hebrews. "And a judge over us. Intendest thou to kill me? Are you going to kill me like you did that Egyptian you killed yesterday? Because I know you did." And guess what? So did other people, apparently. "And you're going to kill me like you did the Egyptian?" And Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known." And you're right. And now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought They slayed Moses, but Moses, he doesn't stand around and wait to see what kind of trouble he's in. He knows he's in trouble, so he takes off. He runs. Now, you'd say, oh, he should have just waited for the judge to clear him. He was an adopted Egyptian out of the tribe of Israel, which they were trying to get rid of anyway, so he knows he better take off. So he does, and he goes in the land of Midian. And he lives up there for a while. Now, Joseph lives in Midian a long time, because we're going to go to verse 24 there, and it says, God heard the moaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. So, basically what that's telling us, the children of Israel were ready to come out of Egypt. And God had always been ready to take them out. But now it's time. But Moses is not in that picture right there. He's out in another land, 300 or 400 miles away. But God says it's time for you guys to get out of Egypt. You know, when Moses left, Israel had probably been in Egypt about 310 years. But he's going to be gone for several years, and he's going to come back. But in verse 3, you can tell all about what happened to Moses down there. He ends up with a wife and some kids. And chapter 4, it says Moses says, "Behold, they will not believe me." And because God's talking to Moses now. And he says, Moses, I want you back home, and I want you to get those people out of there. And guess what? Moses says, oh, sure, I'll go, God. No, he says, no, they won't believe me. I'm not going down there. They have me on a wanted poster. After all, I'm an escaped convict. I mean, really, I don't want to go down there, and they don't want me either. And the Lord said, the Lord had not appeared unto thee. He says, let me read that whole verse. And Moses answered and said that, behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. But they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, that it's Moses, what is in thine hand? And Moses said, it's a rod. And God said, cast it on the ground. And Moses does, and it became a serpent. Now, not most of us, we probably have had some poles in our hand, and we never threw them on the ground, and they changed into a serpent. Now, these serpents aren't really nice serpents either. Okay, they're this, poisonous kind that if they bite you, you don't live very long. But anyway, let's continue. Well, Moses finally God finally convinces Moses, after a lot of discussion, that he's going to go back down to home. As far as he's concerned, Egypt was home. He was an Israelite, but he had just been born in Egypt, and his adopted mom, was part of Pharaoh's family. And so he goes back and runs into his brother. Actually, he knew who his brother was, because they didn't move around very much in those days. So anyway, he goes back, he sees Aaron, and God had tipped Aaron off that God's going to be using Aaron and Moses, but primarily Moses, to lead his people out. Now, we're going to jump over to chapter 6. Then the Lord said unto Moses, thou shalt now see what I will do to Pharaoh, For with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. Now, these people have been slaves probably for about 60, 70 years. Because when the king came in, they knew not the family that Joseph had helped. The new king was a new group of people were on the throne. But now Moses is coming back, and the message he gets is Pharaoh is going to kick those Israelis out of Egypt. He is going to push them out. He's going to want to get rid of them, not by killing them, just getting them on the road and getting out of town. That's all and he's going to do it with a strong hand. He's going to drive them out. And that doesn't mean he's going to put them in the car and drive them. It means he's going to take whips and beat them out. So, God said unto Moses, and saying unto him, I am the Lord. So, he's going on. I'm going to skip a few more chapters here, or at least one chapter. I'm going to go to chapter 7. And the Lord said unto Moses, see, I have made thee, notice, a God, small g, but a God. Moses is going to be thought of by Pharaoh as being someone with supernatural powers. He's going to be a God. You know, the Romans had them, the Greeks had them, they had God-men, you know. They were men that had married another god, and then they had children, and they were God-men. But anyway, Pharaoh's going to look at Moses, even though Moses he knew he was born, but now Pharaoh looks at him and thinks of him as a god, a small g god, but a god. So notice what happens here. I have made thee a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron thy brother shall also be your prophet. So now Moses really has a reputation as far as Pharaoh is concerned. He looks upon him as being a god, and his brother is the prophet for him. And so, verse 2 says in chapter 7, thou shalt speak of thou shalt speak all that I command thee. God says to Moses, you better say what I'm telling you to say. You're going to do this. And Aaron, your brother, shall speak unto Pharaoh. So Aaron's going to be kind of a spokesman too, but Moses is the one that's calling the shots because God's whispering in Moses' ear. And he sent the children of Israel and he will send the children of Israel out of this land, out of his land. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply thy signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. And so this is the instructions that Moses is getting from God. This is what I'm going to do. You're going to go down and talk to this guy, whether you want to or not. You're going to do it. Now, Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. Moses knows that. As soon as he goes and talks to Pharaoh, he knows that every time Pharaoh makes a promise, he's going to what? Not keep it. Kings like to do that. They make promises, they don't have to keep them. Presidents make them, they don't have to keep them. So whatever. But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth mine armies and my people as the children of Israel out of the land by great judgment. So he says, the army is going to be against you. He's going to push you out of the country. And that's exactly what God wanted. Because the Israelites had been a slave nation for about 50, 60 years. About 2 generations had gone by. And so what did they think of themselves?
Slaves.
They hadn't rebelled.
Yeah.
They just thought of themselves as being slaves. So they were letting Egyptians pushed them out, and the Egyptians thought in their mind, they're mightier than we are. We better get in control, or they're going to take over the country. But God knew better than that, because God didn't want them there, and God was going to move them out. Even though most of the Israelites didn't want to go. And if it hadn't been for the Egyptians pushing them out, that's the only reason why they left. Because even as a slave, they thought, hey, I get food, I may work myself to death, but, my family will have food. Anyway, there's all kinds of excuses I can give you, but I'm not. And Moses was 80 years old. Boy, I think he's almost as old as I am. No, actually, he's a little younger than I am. He's only 80 years old. So anyway, and guess what? Aaron is 83. He's 83 years. So, and remember, Moses left when he was about 20 and came back, and he's just coming back. So he was 60 years gone. And so they're going to leave. I mean, the Israelites are going to leave, but they're not going to leave because they want to leave. They're going to leave because they have to leave. Anyhow, Moses and Aaron go in, they see Pharaoh, and then we're going to skip a few more pages. We're going to go to chapter 8. And the Lord spake unto Moses, Go to Pharaoh, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, and that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite thy borders with frogs. Now, there's already been, I think, 3 plagues already. And this is just another one. Pharaoh's kept making promises and breaking them. So this is when it's kind of funny, I think. I mean, it's a plague. They're going to have all these frogs. And remember, frogs are one of the gods of Egypt. Okay, so they have some funny gods. Water's God, alligator's God, frogs are God, So anyhow, and the frogs come up, and boy, there's frogs everywhere. I mean, now frogs by themselves aren't too bad. They're not going to eat you. They're not probably going to bite you unless you get a little tiny and you're a fly or something like that. But they finally, it says, Aaron stretched forth his hand. This is in verse 8 or 6. Over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. They came all out of the water. Now that Nile River is a pretty good sized river, and it's lots of stuff in it, and all the frogs are crawling out and they're going off the land, which is pretty unusual for frogs to do that. And up until this point, the magicians of Pharaoh has been able to duplicate what Moses and Aaron were doing. And the magicians did also with their enchantments and brought up the frogs upon the land of Egypt. So, old Pharaoh's thinking, my enchanters can do it, so it's got to be a trick to this thing, okay? So he's not really convinced that Moses is speaking from God. He just knows something I don't know, all right? And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, Entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let your people go, that they may do sacrifices to the Lord. And notice what Moses said. Moses said unto Pharaoh, Glory over me, when shall I entreat thee, and for thy servant, for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee and thy house, that they may remain in the river only? And Pharaoh says how about tomorrow? Now, if you had a bunch of, say you had 300 or 400 frogs in your house, would you say to the cleaner, leave them out here another day, and you can get them tomorrow. That's why I'm saying, get them out right now, but they didn't say it. Pharaoh didn't say it. He said, that's a good deal. You just pick them up tomorrow. Okay? So, there's a song, I think, it's about living another day with the frogs, but anyway, I don't sing much, I don't sing now. Okay, but he said, do it tomorrow, and he said, be according to thy word, and this is Moses saying, okay, you didn't want I couldn't take them out today, but you can have them tomorrow. You can keep the frogs, maybe there's some pets in there, but they're all going to die, so you better not. Anyway, and so the frogs shall depart from thee, that's tomorrow. Now, jump over to 22, verse 22 of chapter 8. He says, I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, and no swarms of flies shall be there, and to the end that thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. Now, here's another plague that came. But now, the Israelis are going to be protected. There's not going to be any flies, and I hate flies. But these are swarms of flies. I mean, they're like maybe 2,000 or 3,000, but they're probably millions of these things. All over, you can't hardly see out the window with all the flies in the house. And he says, Goshen is not going to get any flies. So, up north, in the land of Goshen, where the Israelites mostly live, there's not going to be any disturbance anymore. There had been with the frogs, there had been with the other things that had occurred, but not anymore. God has separated now the flies from the Egyptians and the Israelites. So the Egyptians are going to get them, but the Israelis are not going to get the flies. He said, I will put a division between my people and thy people tomorrow shall the sign be. This is another way that God's showing Pharaoh that there's a difference between that group of Israelis and the Egyptians. So, it says in 24, the land was corrupted by the reason of the swarms of flies. And Pharaoh called for Moses and for Aaron and says, go ye sacrifice to your God in the land. And Moses said, it is not meet to do or so to do, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and they shall not stone us. So now Moses is showing, okay, we're separating. My people and your people are going to be separated. And so Pharaoh is changing his attitude. He's getting a little more angry. I mean, I would have been angry way back at number 1, but he was more irritated. But now he's beginning to get a little angry. Moses says, we'll go 3 days journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he has commanded us. And Pharaoh says, I will let you go. So he says, I'm going to let you go, but you know what's going to happen. He's not going to let those people go. He needs workers. He's building the pyramids and stuff like that, and those Israelis are good slaves for that kind of work. But Pharaoh has hardened his heart again, and he does not let God's people go. All right, we're going to go on, skip couple chapters here. Let's go to chapter 10, verse 16. Now, there's a bunch of locusts flying around, and they're eating everything. I mean, if you know anything about locusts, they love to eat green stuff. So if they came in here, they wouldn't have a lot of choices. Not a lot of green grass, but along the Nile, there's lots of goodies there as far as the locusts are concerned. And so they're eating everything. They're eating the fruits and the trees, and there's no green thing left. And then Pharaoh calls for Moses in verse 16, and Aaron in haste. And now he's getting a little excited because the food supply is getting eaten up by these little creatures. Now, we have some friends that live in Yager. And it used to be they could eat locusts on a regular basis because they really taste good. You gotta catch them though. But now, since COVID, they have poisoned so many of those locusts that if you eat them now you get sick because of the chemicals that the locusts eat. And so anyway, they don't eat locusts anymore like they used to. The kids used, we have sometimes they have four girls, they used to eat locusts on a regular basis because they were, you fry them, cook them, eat them, that was great. But now they can't do that. They get sick if they eat those locusts because there's too many chemicals in their bodies. So anyway, they didn't have that in those days. But 16, Pharaoh says, called for Moses and Aaron, and they came. He said, I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now notice, now Pharaoh is saying, I've sinned against your God. He wasn't saying that before. And I've sinned against you. And I think that you really not Moses personally, but your people. But maybe he does think it right now that Moses is a god. Well, you know what he's going to do. He's going to make a promise. And he's not going to keep it. And Pharaoh said unto him, let's see, this is down in 28. There's going to be a problem with the cattle. And Pharaoh said unto him, get thee from me, take heed to thyself, and see my face no more. For in that day that thou seest my face, you're going to die. So now Pharaoh's saying, I'm going to kill you the next time I see you. Stop putting plagues on my land. And Moses said, thou hast spoken well. You're not going to see my face again. Moses knows what's coming next. And Pharaoh is not going to be wanting to even talk. He said, I will see thy face no more. And verse 11, and the Lord said unto Moses, yet will I bring one plague more unto Pharaoh and unto Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he will let you go, he shall surely thrust you out. He's not going to say you can go and then keep you. He is going to kick you out. He is going to drive you out of this nation. And speak now in the ears of the people. Start a rumor. Start a rumor. And let every man borrow of his neighbor.
Yeah.
And guess what? Those aren't Israeli neighbors. These are Egyptian neighbors. And every woman of her neighbor. I bet the women like that, but the men, they were going to enjoy this too. Borrow all you can. Jewels of silver and jewels of gold. Borrow everything. Because right now, we're getting ready to leave. He wasn't telling them that, but maybe they had that idea, but they might not have. And the Lord gave the people favor, that is the Israelis, favor in the sight of the Egyptians. The Egyptians wanted them out of the country too. That is, just the common people. They were tired of the Israelis being not punished up here in their land of Goshen. They wanted them out of there. And so they gave up their gold and silver and jewelry, everything they had to get these Israelis out. Now Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, he's going to suffer differently than these people are. Some of them are going to lose their child, but Pharaoh is definitely going to lose his child. So Moses said, go out and ask him. And then he tells them instructions. And verse 7 it says, but against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against men or beasts, that ye may know how that the Lord doth put a difference between Egyptians and Israel. There's a difference. So, Israelis are going to leave. And the Egyptians are going to cry. Not tears of joy, tears of sorrow. Because there's going to be a major problem in Egypt. This month shall be among you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year. So this is the day that Israel starts a new calendar. It's a calendar of freedom. And so they're going to leave, and today is the start date. And they're all going to be gone in just a matter of several hours, but not many hours, a couple of days, that's it. And now he says, speak unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take it to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb of the house. Now, this is down the road, 9 days or so. But get a lamb. Make sure you snag a lamb and have it, because you're going to need it in 10 days. All right. So they're getting ready to leave, but most of the Israelis don't know that. They just think Moses and Pharaoh's having a tug of war between them. But they weren't planning exactly on getting out of town, because they didn't really believe what Moses could do it. All right, let's go. 17. Notice. This is what God's saying to them. Well, let's go to 16. And in the first day there shall be a holy convocation. In the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation to you. No matter the work shall be done, and say that you every man shall eat of it, and only may be done for you. And ye shall observe the feast of the unleavened bread, for in this self day have I brought you armies out of the land of Egypt, and therefore ye shall observe this day in your generation by an ordinance forever. In the first month of the 14th day of the month of Eve, ye shall eat unleavened bread until 1/20th day, that's 21 days, so about a week, 7 days of the month of Eve. Okay, so 7 days, there shall be no leavened bread found in your houses. For whosoever eateth of this, that which is leavened, even the soul, shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he be a stranger or born in the land. So God's given a pretty severe punishment. If you have leavened bread, that means you were not doing what I told you to do. And you're going to suffer consequences. So Moses has got the people ready to go, or at least most of them. Let's go over to 13, chapter 3. The Lord spake before them by the pillar of fire, a pillar of a cloud, to lead them right. Now they've already left, but God's leading them with a cloud and a pillar of fire. So it says, before them by the day in a pillar of cloud, to lead them away, and by night a pillar of fire, to give them light to go by day and night. So the Israelis can go as long as they can go. God's going to give them a big flashlight, a pillar of fire that's going to light their way so they can see where they're going. And in the daytime, there's going to be a pillar, a cloud, to give them shade, because they're out in the desert. And a lot of us have never lived in a desert area, but the daytime can get really hot. But at nighttime, you do want a fire to warm up with, because it'll be 30 to 40 degrees different. It can be 100 today, and tonight it'll be 60. And if you're not wearing the right kind of shirts or whatever you're going to wear, you're going to either want to take it off or put it on. So he took away the pillar of fire, cloud by day, nor it says he took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. So they always had this cloud, either a fire or a cloud. They had this pillar, either a cloud or by a fire. All right, so now Israel's leaving. So and we're going to end here pretty quick. Israel is going into a trap. At least that's what Pharaoh thinks. They went out there with the Red Sea. It's got a kind of a wedge. It's kind of a V type. And they're going to the point of that V. And Pharaoh says, I can bring them all back. I can capture it. Because they can't get away. They can't get through the sea. That's what he thought anyway. And so they're out there in this area that he thinks, okay, it's a trap. He gets his army because he wants those slaves back. He needs them back. He needs them to work. And besides, he hates them. So he's going to go after them. This is what Pharaoh thinks in verse 3 of chapter 14. For Pharaoh said unto the children of Israel, they are entangled in the land of the wilderness and has shut them in. It's shut them in. They can't get out. We're on this side, and the Red Sea is on that side, and they're in between us. We'll get every single one of those. And there's only about 3 million of them. Of course, he's only going to send out maybe 100,000 troops, which is, that's pretty small compared to 3 million. But what are most of these people out there? Are they fighters? They've been slaves all their lives. They probably have shovels. But what are they going to do with it? So he's sending his army after them. Now, and it was told the king of Israel that the people fled, and the heart of the Pharaoh and his servants were turned against the people, that is the Israelis. And they said, why have we done this? That we have let Israel go from serving us? We are going to get them back. And so, verse 7, he took 700 chosen chariots. These are like the super tanks, Because remember, they didn't have gasoline engines back in those days. And all the chariots of Egypt. Now, there's 600 of these really big chariots. They have a driver and they have 3 or 4 men that throw spears off them. Now they have other chariots that just have 1 driver and 1 man. But they have a bunch of those. And they have captains over every one of them. So they have a guy in charge. He can make an independent decision. And they're off to the races. They're out to chase. And they said, okay, this is in verse 11, and they said unto Moses, because there are no graves, this is the children of Israel talking now. Now listen, they have just seen what God has done bringing them out there. Now watch what they say. And they say, that is the Israelis, the people, said unto Moses, because you brought us out here because there's no graves in Egypt to put us. Thou hast taken us away to die in the wilderness. They're not even going to mark our graves. They're just going to push us in a hole and cover us over with sand. So, whereas thou hast dealt this way to carry us forth out of Egypt, you only wanted us out of Egypt just to kill us. That wasn't God's plan, all right? That's not God's plan. Is not this the word that we did tell you in Egypt? See, most of the people that went out of Egypt were complainers. They're not going to change. But they were complainers. They didn't want to go. It was Moses' fault that they were out here. And he wanted them down here just because he wanted them to all get killed. Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians. They liked being a slave better than they liked getting freedom, because freedom caused some work. But slave, they was told what to do all the time. For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. They had no trust in God. God's got them out there. God put that cloud. If you saw a cloud following you and keeping you warm and keeping you from overheating, wouldn't that be kind of nice, especially in hot summers or cold winters? But they're saying, you did that to kill us. That's what you want. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, stand still, see the salvation of the Lord. All you have to do is watch. You don't have to fight. All you have to do is watch. But most of the people wanted to go back. But the Egyptians, now the Egyptians want them back, but before that, they didn't want them. They didn't want them to stay in the country. All right, so now the Egyptians are coming. Look at verse 18. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord. I have given the honor and upon Pharaoh and upon the chariots and upon his horsemen. He says, these people are coming, and the angel of the Lord, notice it's the angel of the Lord here. That's a special angel. Anybody have a guess who that might be? The angel of the Lord?
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. He is. This is him. The angel of the Lord which went before the camp of Israel and removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood between them. So now the angel of the Lord is here. The cloud has also come over and got between the two. That's interesting. But the people didn't see that. They don't understand it. God's protecting them. They just thought, you're going to kill us, Moses. All right. So, notice what happens. 21. Moses stretched out his hands. Everybody knows this story. What happens? All the Israelis, they march across the Red Sea, march under the Red Sea because there's water on two sides, and they're on the ground, so they're under the ocean or the sea. So they walk across, and it says on what kind of ground? Dry. I bet when we go home tonight and we look at those trees, they're still going to be wet, and it's been over 24 hours. But God did just like that, dry ground. Notice, okay, now, he stretched, it opened up. Now, 21, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all the night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. So, water here, water there, but dry land there, and let's go. And it came to pass, in the morning, looked out, the host of the Egyptians were behind them, and they took off. Now, the Egyptians are trying to come down through that path that God made for the Israelites. And I didn't know God was a mechanic, but he sure must have been, because look, verse 25, and took off their chariot wheels. Whoops. And all I could do was drag them. And so that the Egyptians said, let us flee, because they weren't stupid. They knew God had opened that gate up for the Israelites, but it wasn't theirs, because the wheels are coming off these chariots, and now they're stuck. So what are they going to have to do? They're going to run, they're going to flee. Let us flee the face of Israel, and for the Lord fighteth for them. Ah. They thought God was fighting for them. The Egyptians thought they were on God's side, I think, but they figured out He's not on our side. We're out here in the middle of this water, and it's not dry. It may still be dry land right now, but all the wheels have come off the chariots, and He's against us. He's against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, and upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. And everybody that came in that army disappeared. They didn't exactly disappear because they were under the water. You just couldn't see them. Moses stretched forth his hand, and the water returned, covered the chariots, covered the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that had come into the sea after them. If you had gotten into the sea after them, you didn't come back. There might have been some that were with the king, and they hadn't gone into the water under the. But thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. The ones that didn't have metal and stuff like that on them, just had them spears, they washed up on shore. Everybody else never seen again. And Israel saw the great work. Now this is Israel watching. Israel has seen a bunch of things happen. And he said, the Israelites saw the great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Well, they did that for about 7 days. They feared God. And then you go back here a couple chapters, and guess what? They ran out of food. And guess what? He hates us. He brought us out here to die. And then what did God have to do? Has to bring manna, feed them. And they still were angry with God. Because he didn't send them meat. Then he sent them quail. That's kind of a meat, you know. Chicken, but, you know. But they still complained and murmured. They see all these miracles. And they still said, God, you brought us out of the dark. Now, this was the people that later on would have to go to Jericho, but they wouldn't go because God's going to kill them all. Because they would not obey and they refused to give God credit where credit was due. When they come to bitter water, God clears it up, they complain. Every time they move more than 10 miles, they start complaining. In verse 16, number 3, it says, this is their attitude. The children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt. We're wishing we were dead because God's brought us out of Egypt into a new land. When we sat by the fresh pots, oh, they love that fresh pot, you know, whatever that was. And when we did eat bread to full, for ye have brought us forth into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. And there's more accounts. Over in 13, that's when he gave them the quail to eat. And they still complain. In verse 15 it says, this is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. And in a few days they're going to be complaining about that. And God tells them, okay, you're going to get free food for 6 days, and then there's going to be a day where you won't get food. But on that 6th day, you can get double so you'll have enough for the Sabbath. And guess what? A lot of people didn't believe him. And they came out on the seventh day, and guess what? There was nothing. They had sandbars. But anyway, so this is the kind of people that are coming into the promised land. And God has protected them, protected them, protected them. And they say, you're going to kill us. You brought us out here to kill us. And every time he's protecting. He's going ahead. He's fighting it. Groups of people that are ahead of them. But they can't believe that God is God. You know? Even though God has shown them all kinds of miracles. I mean, I think I could believe that there is a God with just one of those miracles. I know I could, because I do. But after so many miracles, they take it for granted. But they're still not going to believe him. They're not going to follow him. We're going to stop 17 because I want to finish on Thursday. All right. But anyway, so far, Moses has done exactly what he told him he was going to do. God's protected him. God's saved them. He's fed them. He's watered them. He's killed armies that were coming after them. And they still can't believe that God can protect them. Or that he wants to protect them. But we'll leave it right there. All right, I've got to quit because I won't get done. So, Brother AJ, come on up. That's the other AJ.